what's not true. You know what's to me is even worse, Stu? What they've ignored is what Zelensky has done since he's been in office. If you go to Donbass in the east of Ukraine, if you go to Odessa, if you go to Lugansk, you know what you'll find? Mass graves all across the east of Ukraine. And that is on Zelensky's watch. It's Zelensky and the Ukrainian military and paramilitaries who have put those people in the ground. When they voted to secede, when they showed that the people were at least a majority were in favor of, being independent and going with Russia, that was not a narrative that the West was ever, we weren't going to tell that story. We were just going to ignore it. We're going to parrot out what Zelensky and the West wants us to say about Ukraine. And we're going to ignore the memorials to those killed. In Odessa, during one of the protests, right, people went into a public building and it was set on fire. Of course, nobody knows who. And guess what? As the people were coming out of the windows and coming out of wherever they could to avoid being burned alive, they were being bludgeoned to death and shot. Okay. And guess by whom? By the very people that we have been arming and equipping. Don't forget, with Ukraine impeachment, right? That whole thing was about, Trump withheld necessary aid for just, for a matter of, a few hours or for a moment. And our allies needed that so desperately. Our allies who you don't have to look very far to find pictures of our allies holding up the NATO flag and their battalion flag and the swastika. So I just want to understand this. It's okay for the United States to arm, fund, support, and equip Nazis in the Ukraine, but it's not okay to vote for Donald Trump. That makes you an instant Nazi here, which is a death sentence in America. This is why John Solomon at Just the News was so heavily attacked, right? Because his reporting was absolutely spot on. He was 100% accurate, everything that he was saying. And what he was exposing is something much more nefarious than I think most people realize. You have the Open Society Foundation and all the related, organizations. They call them NGOs and charities, right? But there's nothing charitable about these people. They're as political as it comes. And they're extremely radical. They have a very nefarious agenda. They launder money through their 501c status, sharing it all with each other. And even worse than that, they figured out a way to rob us blind. They use our tax dollars through USAID, and they distribute that in places like Ukraine and all over the world. And what you found in John Solomon's reporting is not only are they stealing from us and funding their agenda with our tax dollars, laundering money through the NGOs and the oligarchs, what they're also doing is running policy through the US embassies. Why do you think Maria Yovanovitch, the former ambassador, was so anti-Trump and so outraged that the people of America actually chose their own president instead of the one that was selected for them, right? Hillary Clinton. Why do you think she didn't have an acceptance speech, anything planned, right? Only an acceptance speech. She didn't have a concession speech planned because she was guaranteed, right? She was guaranteed that election. She barely bothered to campaign. And yet they were so certain that she was going to win because the fix was already in. They just didn't get away with it in 2016. It wasn't on the scale that happened in 2020. So what do you have? If you go back to John Solomon's reporting, which I would urge everybody to do, because on his website, he has a transparency feature, and you can look at the actual emails with people from the Open Society Foundation and the National Endowment for Democracy and all of these other groups. And you can see them arranging meetings, deciding, giving lists and names of who should be investigated for corruption and who shouldn't be. And by the way, isn't everybody just a little bit stunned that a place like Ukraine, which many Americans, let's face it, couldn't even point out on a map, is now suddenly the thing that we wake up with Ukraine on our lips and we sleep at night with Ukraine on our minds and in our dreams and in our prayers and everything else. Not to say that my heart doesn't break for the people of Ukraine, but what I don't want is I don't want to be led blindly into a war that comes right to our doors, to our families, to our children and our houses, because the people who are lying to you about Ukraine, the people who lied about Russia, people who've lied about COVID, they unleashed a bioweapon on the world that isn't finished killing people. And we don't talk about that because they want us to follow the next shiny little object. And COVID is falling apart in every direction. Hunter Biden is heading for indictment and nobody's talking about Durham, right? We're not focused on the things that we should be focused on. And these people want us to focus on Ukraine because they play the emotional card. It's the same thing with gun control. Don't talk about anything else. Just talk about the children who died. Just talk about the trauma of the victims. Focus on the emotion. Where do you see that playbook, Stu? You see it everywhere with almost every single issue.
All the same people that lied to us about the election, the same people that lied to us about gun control.
Yep.
We've exposed the American Medical Association, who has a handbook that teaches doctors how to fend off interviewers that are asking real questions about COVID-19 or the virus or the vaccines or the protocols or the treatment. And the same people, CBS, CNN, MSNBC, and the rest of these demonic state mockingbird media outlets, are now in lockstep on this Russia and Putin bad narrative with guys like Hannity and Levin over at Fox. Why?
I don't know is the honest answer, right? I mean, I can only tell you what I believe in my gut. I haven't talked to Sean and I haven't talked to Mark Levin, so I don't know firsthand what it is that they're thinking. But I think they get, a lot of journalists get seduced by this victim narrative, the emotional narrative of, oh goodness, the people of Ukraine are suffering. Therefore, we have to, we cannot possibly show that we don't care about that. And I think that they just haven't done their homework. They haven't really figured out what it's all about, and they've bought into that narrative and they're going to push it. I could be wrong about that. I mean, I'm telling you, that's just a superficial analysis.
Yeah, I mean, is it that, or is it that the network is owned by the same people, the BlackRocks and the Vanguards and the investors like Soros and Pfizer, and that's why Hannity has to shill for the shots, and that's why they have to say that Putin is the enemy and that he's bad and that he's going to use, by the way, chemical weapons against the people of Ukraine. No. Prediction, Stu Peters show prediction. Ukraine is going to use chemical weapons against its own people at the direction of the U.S. State Department, and then we are ready to blame it on Vladimir Putin. We did this in Libya. We did this in Iraq. We did this in Syria when Obama drew the red line. It's going to happen, isn't it?
So I would agree 100% with that part of what you're saying. It's actually called projection. In information warfare terms, what you do is you project your actions or motivations or whatever it is onto your adversary in advance, so that when it happens, you've already set the stage, right? It's shaping the information environment. It's kind of like you project that there's going to be a blue